everybody, and welcome to episode, I think we're on episode 6 now. Wow, that's crazy. Of the Travel Bug Girls podcast. Welcome. I'm Kimmy, and I'll be your host today. I'm here with Cassie, Tina, and Heather. And today we are going to be talking about a very important topic that probably a lot of people don't think about, or they think it's a scam: travel insurance. Heather's going to kind of take the lead on this for us. And why is travel insurance important? Why do we need to protect ourselves? What are we even protecting ourselves from with travel insurance? So what is travel insurance and what does it typically cover? Let's start there.
Excellent questions. So travel insurance essentially covers the expense that you've invested in your trip upfront. So that is the first part that it covers. And primarily the point is that if something goes wrong and you've paid several $1,000s to go on a big vacation, that you want to know that you're going to recoup at least some portion of that expense if the trip doesn't happen or something, catastrophic like a hurricane happens or something. You want to make sure that you're going to be reimbursed so that you can end up hopefully actually having a vacation later, maybe with that money. So that's the first part. The other thing is they often include additional coverage for health situations while you're traveling. So it's like an extension of your health coverage in that way. And they'll usually have inclusions like, life flighting you out of hard to reach places, or, if you've ever seen any of these news stories where someone ended up needing surgery while they were on a cruise and they're in the middle of the sea on a boat and they have to get them then to a hospital to do surgery. That is something that would come under all of those expenses associated with that would come under your travel insurance. And of course, if you didn't have travel insurance, then you really could end up in a really difficult financial situation.
Are there different types of travel insurance or,
Yes. And there are many great, really well-established companies that have been selling travel insurance for a very long time. So they've really perfected what is really needed when people are traveling, and they've seen a lot of the different kind of scenarios. So they've created some really nice coverage. So what we typically see are three main types of insurances being offered. One is the trip insurance by itself. So you've probably seen this if you've booked your own travel somewhere. You book an air flight, and at the end, they offer to sell you insurance to cover your flight. You book a cruise, they offer you insurance to cover your cruise. So those companies in that situation have partnered with a travel insurance company to offer these policies in connection with their product. So what I'm often, though, connecting my clients with is something that's broader than that. So if they go on a cruise, for example, they might buy the insurance policy the cruise ship offers, but they might want something that covers a little more, like the flight down and back, the hotel the night before, the night after they end their cruise. They might want something that covers their entire trip. So in that case, I'm going to be offering them some quotes from different companies that are going to cover the entirety of their vacation. So that's still considered, though, a one-trip policy. Another option would be an annual policy. And those are harder to find, but there are some really great companies. We have one that we work with a lot that offers an annual policy that's very affordable. So I try to bring it up often just because I would want to know about it. I didn't know that existed before. Mm-hmm. And I could have used that in my personal life for a long time before I became a travel agent. And it would have been really helpful. And the annual policies work like this. You pay one fee and it covers you for an entire calendar year. So from the day you start until the next year, the day before that date. And so that would cover any trip. The one I'm thinking about in particular, their policy states that it covers any travel that is more than 100 miles from your home for the entire calendar calendar year. So if you know you're going to go on a cruise in May and then you're going to go, for my example, just my own personal actual year of this year, I'm going to go on a cruise in May. I'm going to go visit my mother in France in the fall. And I know I have at least 2 other smaller trips that are more than 100 miles where I'm going to stay in a hotel and have driving expenses or flying expenses during the course of that trip. So that all of those trips would be covered under this one fee that I would pay. And I would not have to worry all year long about any of that. And it's good until next year. So if I even end up planning a trip, in January of next year, and I'm just now buying that policy, then I could be covered for that trip as well.
What are some common misconceptions about travel insurance?
Ooh, okay. First of all, I think there are a lot of people that think it is a scam. Have you guys seen some of this or heard this kind of
yeah. I mean, before I became a travel agent, I totally would never have bought travel insurance.
Me either.
I definitely thought it was a waste of money.
Definitely. I think I fell into that category too of thinking like that's just one way they're trying to get more money out of me, but now if I don't have the insurance, then I'm worried. Now I'm worried when I don't have it. I'm like, why didn't I buy it? So it does give me peace of mind now because I have seen so many things that can go wrong. And a lot of them are really basic issues that happen. But with our airline services is not as reliable as it used to be. That's a major issue for pretty much every client I work with. They're concerned, will we actually get to go on the trip? Will I end up being 2 days late and miss my cruise or miss the tour that I'm paid all this thousands of dollars to go on, in Europe or something? And so that is a serious concern. So just a flight disruption can derail your entire vacation if it's tightly scheduled. So having something that makes sure that you can, handle all the expenses if that happens, plus rescheduling that trip later because you've gotten your money back is going to make a huge difference to your state of mind. So I think I got off the topic there though, because you asked me about misconceptions. I think the misconception is that it's just a scam, right? That it's not worth your money, that they're just trying to take advantage of people that are buying a trip. And that's just really, honestly, after doing a lot more research and a lot more work with these companies, I see that is not at all the case. And they do pay out and assure, just like any other industry. There are some that are more reputable than others. There are some that you can definitely rely on to have great customer service, and they really do want to make sure you have what you need. And so it's really, in that case, comes down to choosing the right people to work with.
What are the risks of traveling without insurance? I'm sure we all know stories.
Yeah.
What are we risking?
Why don't you share a story, Cassie, about?
So, we go to Disney during hurricane season because why? That's the cheapest time to go. And up until a couple years ago, nothing had ever transpired. Like, we would plan these Halloween parties and I'd say, please don't let it rain. Like, it's hurricane season. The worst we could have is a little bit of rain. So a few years ago, the first year we decided to drive 12 hours to Orlando. It took us 2 days to drive. We got down there. We stayed one day. We had one magical day in the Magic Kingdom. And we had been kind of low-key watching Hurricane Ian coming in. And so we had Halloween party tickets for a family of 4. That was close to $1,000. We had 3 more park day tickets. We had a meal plan. We had our hotel stay. And I had used a travel agent at the time because this was several years ago. And we had bought the travel insurance that came with it because that's a dicey time to go anyway. We got all of our money back with the exception of the Halloween party tickets, which Disney refunded on a gift card that we used to book our next Disney trip. So it really saved us Disney's a couple $1,000s for just a few days. So this was our big once a year trip, and it really saved us in, we thought we could stay. It wasn't going to be such a big deal. But my kids were very small. I was worried for them. So we drove essentially 4 days to stay one. But Disney was wonderful. The customer service was wonderful, but we had that travel insurance and we had that peace of mind to know that we would, recoup that cost, and it wasn't just, $4,000 down the drain because, oops, sorry about your luck.
Exactly. And so in the last year, I've had several clients that have had some pretty crazy things happen, Cassie. And that's a great example. Like hurricane season is when we're going to see insanely good deals on resorts and cruises and all kinds of things. And I have a group right now that's going to Punta Cana in September. And the first thing I said was, we need to talk about travel insurance. I don't know if you've ever bought it before, but we need to have a very serious conversation about that before we even book your trip, because it's just so much more likely that they're going to end up in a situation. And we want to make sure they understand what's going to happen, how it would work out, what would be covered, what wouldn't, And so having those conversations up front has been really helpful because a lot of us just really aren't educated in this area before we get into it. So last year I had a client that was traveling to Iceland, and they had been before. They were excited to go back. This is a big family trip for a special occasion. So they spent all year looking forward to it. And then in the fall, this was going to be a New Year's Eve trip. In the fall, the volcano started erupting, and we were getting a lot of reports about damage, what's going to be closed down, what's going to be open in that region, how it was affecting the air quality, how it might affect flights. So there was a lot of chatter, even in the media, about what was happening and how it could affect travelers. And so they began to get very concerned. They had tickets to the Blue Lagoon, and the lava flow was right next to the Blue Lagoon, and they shut down the Blue Lagoon for safety, obviously. And so that was not a problem because it was far enough out when that happened that we could reschedule to a different place. So they could have a similar experience in a different place. But the real concern was one of the family members traveling was an asthmatic, and the ash in the air was a very real concern. And so they were having conversations with their doctor, like, should we even go? What are our options? So the conversations with me were, what are our options if we decide not to go to protect her? What are we going to do about this? And so I looked it up in their policy. They had bought the insurance, and I was even thinking, well, acts of God aren't covered, right? Like extreme acts of nature probably aren't covered. So I pull it up expecting it to say that it's not going to be covered, but it was. It was written there in black and white. Volcanic activity is covered. Prevention, like trying to prevent a health issue because it's a dangerous environment, was covered. She was covered. And they also had an extra rider on their policy because they had bought the policy within 2 weeks of paying their first deposit. They had an extra rider that covered pre-existing conditions even. So even if they had gone and then she had some kind of extreme episode and they needed to get her out of there quickly, then all of that would have been covered under their travel insurance. So in the end, they did go and they had a wonderful time and everything was fine. But if they had decided to cancel on their own, just out of an extreme of caution, they would have been fully covered and gotten a full refund for their entire trip, including airfare and everything, so that they could have rescheduled a different trip to celebrate instead. So that really was a great lesson to me in the power of some of these policies to give you peace of mind when you're facing something that is just completely out of your control and you want to make the best decision about how to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just having like that peace of mind, like you said, behind you, is huge. If you are traveling without insurance and something goes wrong,
Yeah.
I mean, think about like a medical emergency, like how much money that can be.
Yes.
Like if you're on a cruise ship and you have to get off in Mexico and then get like a special flight back to the States or whatever, like you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars unexpected. That can be a huge issue. Even something as simple as like lost luggage. If your luggage gets lost, that's all your clothes, everything you needed.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking hundreds of dollars just to replace that you weren't expecting. And travel insurance can even cover things like that. So this kind of leads into the benefits of travel insurance. We've kind of, I guess, talked about a little bit of that, but can you go into that maybe a little bit more in detail? Like,
sure. So a lot of the benefits would be, we've talked about a lot of the extra health expenses, life flight, things like that. Those are medical evacuations, things like that are going to be covered. But in addition to that, you're going to see luggage replacement. If there's theft, right, you could have some theft coverage. Or damaged luggage. I mean, some of our luggage is expensive. It could cost you $600 or $900 just to buy a set of luggage. So then if it gets beaten up or stolen and you have to replace that luggage, that's a huge expense right there. So in that case, that could be covered. Some of the smaller things that we see all the time, and I'm sure we've all been in this situation where the airlines have canceled our flight or it's so delayed that we've missed everything and now we're all going to be flying tomorrow instead of today. And it's this huge headache. And sometimes they give you a hotel. Sometimes they give you food vouchers. But have you ever been in a situation where they didn't give you those things? Yep. So what happens then? Now you're out money because of something that's out of your control. It's not your fault right? You did everything you were supposed to do and were there on time and it doesn't matter. You're now stuck. And so that is considered trip delay, and trip delay can be covered as an expense. That's a pretty common expense that's covered. So in that case, we would say keep all your receipts. So your hotel that night, if you had to pay transportation like a taxi or an Uber to get you to the hotel for the night, if you had to buy yourself a meal or 2 or 3 because you're stuck indefinitely, then if you had to buy new clothes because all your clothes went on the plane and you didn't get on it and you don't have your luggage and you don't even know where it is right now, right? And you had to buy clothes for tomorrow or a toothbrush. Like all of that could be submitted for consideration under your policy for trip delay. So that's the kind of thing that's just like a totally normal situation that happens to people probably, right? Like 1 million people a year that probably happens to in our world. And so those are things that could be covered under travel policies. In addition, of course, to, you're going to go and your trip is canceled because of a hurricane, as long as, usually it's written something like, as long as you had bought the policy before the storm was named, then you're covered. If you're like, oh no, Hurricane Katrina is coming and my trip's tomorrow, I probably should buy this coverage tonight. Sorry. You can buy the coverage. They're not going to not let you buy that coverage, but it's also not going to cover your trip because you're buying it after the fact, So if you're planning your trip in January and your trip's not till September, we don't have any storms named now for what's going to happen in September. So you're good. So that's the kind of scenarios though that happen to people every year that are completely normal and not crazy scenarios that are covered very easily. Like Cassie telling her story about, the hurricane coming when they were going to go to Disney. So when you've invested thousands of dollars, this is when we're recommending you take seriously. But even if it's going to hurt you, to lose your $600 flight, or you have $400 invested in a hotel, if it's going to hurt you financially to lose that money, then it's maybe worth it to you to look at a policy. And the policies are based on how expensive your trip is. So other than like the flat rate annual plans, like a trip by trip policy is going to be based on the amount you're investing in the trip. So it's totally worth it to you to look into that policy and see, what is covered and would it be worth it to you to have it. It's about protecting your investment.
Yeah. So if you're going on a trip, you want to get travel insurance, you're convinced. how do you choose the right travel insurance? Like what do you even need to look for?
Well, so first of all, there are companies that are really well established that are very reputable and have good customer service and are going to protect your trip well in a way that's easy to work with. So some of the companies that I would recommend would be Allianz. In America, you would probably just say Alliance. It ends with a Z. That's a very well established insurance company. The one I enjoy working with a lot is Chubb, CHUBB. They're excellent to work with. That company you can only access through a travel agent. So we're going to be able to get you some really good rates working with Chubb. And then we're also able to help connect you when you need help. So we're kind of in on the loop. And that's really nice because if something's going wrong, you want a real person you can trust to help you with that. So those are just two examples. There are many others out there, but those are two great examples of well-established companies that you could work with. And then once you get a quote, to get a quote, you're going to need information like your personal information, full names, date of birth, your address, that kind of thing. But then also the amount that is covered, like the amount it is costing you to go on this trip. So you need to already have that information before you apply for a quote. Then once you receive your quote to look between different policies, you're going to really look at what's covered. You know, how much of these health insurance policies are written into these travel policies? How much is it going to cover, you know, about luggage loss and that kind of stuff? Are these things, can I cancel for any reason? That is a big one. A cancel for any reason policy is like gold, because then if you have a personal situation that happens the week before your trip, you can say, yeah, I'd love to go on this vacation, but I can't because, you know, so-and-so just died, or I fell down the stairs and I'm in the hospital, right? Like you had something that you didn't know was going to happen and it's ruined your trip before you even went on the trip. A cancel for any reason policy is going to recoup your expenses so that you can go on that trip later when everything is safe and good and fine in your life again. So that is something that is really, really important, and to ask for if that's something that you want to be involved.
And I think depending on what you're okay with getting back, you know, if you say, okay, I don't necessarily need to get money back because I'm okay with getting trip credit, you know, that might be because you're going to go somewhere else later. So maybe you're like, this is a trip that I'll probably take again next year. So I'll get a policy that just gets me the trip credit back.
Yeah, exactly. Or let's say you have excellent healthcare insurance, you know, and you know already that I already have like medical evacuation coverage with my regular healthcare. It already has an international rider or something. I mean, that's a possibility. So if you know that, then you don't need that extra. So maybe you can buy a lower policy level that has less of those extra medical coverage pieces because you already have that coverage. There's no reason to pay for something you already have, right? Nobody really wants that for you. So, and that's another thing to keep in mind, going back to that initial idea, this idea that some of us feel like it's a scam, like, can we all just take a breath and not just assume that everyone's trying to scam you out of your money? You know, there are legit companies that just really, truly want to help you. And, you know, there are legit travel agents who desperately want to help you. They really do want you to have more fun, save money, have a great time, and come back and hire them next year to do the same thing over, you know? And so they're not trying to scam you. They're trying to help you. And if you can approach all of these conversations that way, you know, especially if you know you're working with someone who's reputable, then you can relax and ask them the questions that really guide you to what you really truly need.
Do you have any tips or anything for, like, if you're wanting to purchase travel insurance? Any tips in particular?
Definitely ask a travel agent. You can do some Google research, find some of the companies that are, you know, most commonly used. That really helps to have it narrowed down. If you already know you want to work with a certain company, then even if you are working with a travel agent, you can say, hey, I'm really interested in a policy quote from so-and-so. You know, that's going to help. And then then be open to options because, like I said, there are sometimes things that you maybe didn't know existed. I hope we were able to help someone understand the concept of, like, for example, cancel for any reason policies and, annual plans. Those are things that a lot of people don't know exist. So it's really nice if you can look into some alternative options. And also, my other tip would be don't just take the one that's offered to you from like the cruise line, for example. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be a bad deal, but like, price check it with something else. Look a little deep, look beyond, say what's covered with this. If I do cancel my cruise, am I covered? Or is it only covered if you cancel my cruise? Are we only covered if there's a catastrophic incident? Or are some of these minor things that happen to everybody every day kind of scenarios, are they covered too? Really make sure you're looking in to see what's covered and then get us at least one other quote from another company so that you can really compare and know what's best for you in your situation.
Can you kind of give us like a price range? I know you can't, I know because it's based on like the expense of but are we talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars or probably not that much, but
Definitely
are we
not.
talking like hundreds of dollars extra? Are we talking like $5 or,
It depends entirely on the situation. So, I've seen flight insurance be like $20, right? But, the annual plan, I had a client that was going to be traveling extensively, probably spending close to $30,000 in the next year on travel or more. 30,000 I knew about, let me say it that way, that I knew about. And they had an annual policy come back in like the $300 range. That is a great investment coverage. Yeah. That's $300 well spent, right? Yeah. And it also gave them the freedom to add more travel and they would still be covered. So those are the kinds of things that you really have to keep in mind. And it's going to be essentially some percentage of your total expense. So knowing that maybe it helps you get a better idea of, what it could cost. And then, of course, one of the other questions that people ask, my mother-in-law asked me this when I was talking to her about travel insurance one day. She said, well, what about if you're older? Because there does come a point in life where we all are told we can't afford insurance anymore because we're old. And what a shame, right? But I can see why it happens. My husband works in the insurance industry. It's a math situation. Statistically, you're more likely to have something happen to you personally that is going to interrupt your travel. It's probably going to be health related, and so it's just more likely to happen. It could happen to anyone, right? But it's more likely to happen when we're older. The problem with that is it means that sometimes the insurance is more expensive when we're older, but it doesn't mean it's not worth looking into because if it's more likely to happen, then wouldn't you rather be more protected, right?
Yeah.
And know that you're not going to be trapped somewhere in this catastrophic situation with nobody to help you. So we want to make sure that you have what you need. Don't be afraid to ask. There's nothing spent in asking for a quote. The person who is inconvenienced in that process is the travel agent or the person, if it's a real person, doing a quote for you from an insurance company, right? Those employees are the ones who are out if you decide you don't want that policy. So it is in your best interest as the traveler to make them do a little work and get you some numbers so that you can really decide for yourself whether you want to invest in, really honestly protect your investment that you've already made in your trip.
Yeah, that's great.
And to kind of just add on to that, I know I finished some Carnival training recently, and a lot of times these trip insurances, if you do payments, flex pay, Disney, most people are doing payments. Most people's not paying thousands of dollars just right now. They will add it in and let you pay as you're paying on your trip. So it's not an upfront cost. And I think that kind of helps. I know it helps my millennial heart to think that I could flex pay that versus I need it right today. So
good point.
Yeah, good point. Definitely. Well, I think we've established that, if we're going to invest in traveling, it's in our best interest to invest in protecting that. And it really kind of gives us a safety net when we're traveling if something does go wrong. So we're not also having to worry about how we're going to pay to resolve whatever situation we're in. So I think this has been a really good episode, and hopefully just helped educate people a little bit on what travel insurance really is and does. And it's not a scam, you know, it really is something that can be helpful for travelers. So, and of course, you know, talk to your travel agent, like you talked about. Like some of these can only be accessed through a travel agent, and you know, we're here to help people choose the travel insurance policy that's going to be best for the type of travel that we're taking. That's part of what we're here for. So great episode. Let's close out with, again, where are our minds today? Where are we traveling today? I'll start. I am traveling to Greece in my mind today.
Nice.
Yes, that beautiful clear water. Just so much I want to do in Greece. What about you guys?
I'm traveling in my mind to Wyoming. We were talking about the annual fees, so I'll be going to visit some family, and not Yellowstone area, but so I'll be visiting family in Wyoming, and so and I'll probably be making a couple other road trips. So that's where I am.
Cool. Cassie?
Universal Studios. I have watched so many videos on the new parks that's opening May 22nd. We're almost there. So
Almost there. I love it. Okay, let's see. I'm thinking today about Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic. I'm working with a family that's having a wedding there this fall. So all the photos look so beautiful.
Yeah, it does look beautiful. Well, you guys can share with your answer with us on Facebook under this week's podcast question at facebook.com/travelbuggirls. And you can find us on your favorite social media by using @travelbugs. Want to join our Facebook group? You can find us in Facebook groups under TBG Travel Bugs or at facebook.com/groups/TBG Travel Bugs. Thank you for joining us. Next episode, we're going to be talking about wellness travel.